Thank you all so much for this warm welcome. And I want to start actually by thanking Warren and Father Leahy for convening us all today. One of the core missions at the Boston Globe is to serve our community as a catalytic convener, which we strive to do in many ways. One, as Warren mentioned, was collaborating with Harvard, MIT, and Mass General Hospital to create a large convening called Hub Week, which shows how art, science, and technology collide here to build the future. We also do it in a lot of other ways, in conversations, in debates, in deep dives, in documentary film screenings to, again, bring this community together and define who we are. And so thank you, Warren and BC and Father Leahy, for serving as that convener here for this really important and vibrant business community. And today, I'm so excited to talk with Michael Dell, who is someone who has continuously shown an ability to see opportunities and problems before many of his competitors, and has been willing to take some really big strategic risks on these insights. Michael is chairman and CEO of Dell Technologies, which is a family of businesses now encompassing Dell EMC, Pivotal, RSA, SecureWorks, Virtuous Stream, and VMware. Am I missing any? Yes, no, sorry. Combined, Dell Technologies is an innovator and technology leader, providing the essential infrastructure for organizations to build their digital future, transform their IT, and protect their most important information. Here in Boston, we took a lot of attention to Dell when the $67 billion merger with EMC was announced, which closed in September a year ago. It was the biggest tech deal in history. And this happened just a few years after Michael took Dell Corporation private in 2013. Today, with combined revenues of $74 billion and more than 138,000 employees, Dell Technologies is number 41 on the Fortune 500 of America's biggest corporations, one of the world's largest IT companies, and it's serving global corporations and governments to small businesses and consumers. Michael's story, which we'll get him to give us some details on, started when he founded Dell with $1,000 in his college dorm room in 1984 at the age of 19. Notably quoted as saying that technology is about enabling human potential, Michael's vision of how technology should be designed, manufactured, and sold forever changed the IT industry. In 1992, Michael became the youngest CEO ever to earn a ranking on the Fortune 500. For more detail on Michael, he and his wife in 1999 started the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation, which is taking the same approach of innovation and seeing opportunities in problem solving to the philanthropic world. Michael is an honorary member of the Foundation Board of the World Economic Forum, is an executive committee member of the International Business Council. He's a member of the Technology CEO Council, the U.S. Business Council and Business Roundtable. He serves on the advisory board of Tsinghua University School of Economics and Management in Beijing, China, and on the governing board of the Indian School of Business in Hyderabad, India. Am I missing anything? Please join us, Michael Dell. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. So I want to start with you. There is an exciting story from how it all began when you were in high school. And for me, it was particular interest because a lot of this comes back to newspapers. Can you tell us about one of your early high school ventures?
I will, but first of all, thank you all very much for the warm welcome. You know, we completed the combination 14 months ago, and the community here in Boston's been incredibly welcoming, and we're really thrilled with the progress we're making. I'm sure we'll get into some of that later. So let's start with the newspaper business.
Yeah.
So when I turned 16 years old, I was able to drive. And so the jobs that I could get, expanded pretty dramatically. Before I could drive, with sort of limited employment opportunities. And so I got this job with the Houston Post newspaper. And it no longer exists. It's now part of the Houston Chronicle.
That's because you're no longer working there.
It happened after I left. So my job was, I was a telephone solicitor, okay? And they gave us these big long sheets of phone numbers, And you would call the phone number and you'd say, hey, I'm from the Houston Post newspaper, and we have this free trial for 2 weeks, and if you like the paper, you can subscribe to it, that sort of thing. So I'm doing this, and I notice two things kind of stood out as I was doing this. Well, there's a third thing, but the main two things were that people that were moving often bought the newspaper. Okay? When they were moving to a new place, they'd often get the newspaper. And then the other thing I noticed is that people that were getting married would often get the newspaper. Okay? And so what I figured out was that one was that if you went down to the county courthouse, the applications for marriage licenses were public information. Okay? And on those applications for marriage licenses was the address that you wanted the license to be sent to. Okay? So what I did was I went to the county courthouse, copied down all these addresses, came up with a direct mail campaign, and sent it out to all those people. I did it in the main county where Houston was. It worked really well. Then I hired a bunch of my high school buddies who went to all 16 surrounding counties. Anyway, we sold a whole bunch of newspapers.
So you're early data mining.
The other thing that I found was there were actually lists of people that had applied for mortgages that you could obtain. And this was a bit of a boom time in Houston where there were all these big condos going up and high rises. And I would show up at these places and say, hey, I'm from the Houston Post. And we've got a special promotion for all your new tenants. and make this part of your welcome kit. So anyway, I sold a lot of newspapers. It was fun.
And so from that, you learned not only about data mining, but also expanding, targeting your sales, and going direct to consumer for sales at this young age. And there was a funny note that you were actually earning more than your high school teachers at this point.
Yes.
Selling newspapers.
That happened.
And so when you went to college, you were a good pre-med student, and you got a computer and you took it apart. And in taking it apart, you realized that the sum of the computer that you were being sold was far less than the price of $3,000 that you paid. And so in there, you found another opportunity.
Yeah, so I always like to take things apart, and sometimes I put them back together. You don't know how they work until you take them apart, and and I like to upgrade things and like improve them. And at the time, this was sort of at the dawn of the age of the personal computer and microprocessor-based computing, and the computing architecture was relatively straightforward in the sense that you could understand all the different parts and pieces relatively simply and understand how they fit together. And IBM, which if you go back to the late 70s, early 80s, they were dominant in the field of technology like no other firm was ever dominant in any field at any time. It was just like overwhelmingly successful. So when they decided to enter the personal computer business, it was like really important. So, and I was sort of enthralled with the idea of computing machines, and now you could have one as an individual and a small business, and they were getting more affordable. So that was really intriguing to me. And then, when I started taking these things apart, exactly what you said, it was like $3,000, but inside it was $500 worth of parts. And that kind of didn't really seem fair, right? and so I was buying these computers and upgrading them, and while I was going to school, and my parents got pretty upset with me because I was supposed to be focusing on my studies, and so they made me stop doing that, which that lasted for about 10 days. And it was actually during those 10 days that they made me stop doing it that I realized that it was more than just something I enjoyed doing. I was actually quite excited about it, and there was a huge opportunity. So during my freshman year at the University of Texas, I kind of set in motion some things that ultimately started our company about 10 days before my final exams of my freshman year.
Excellent
which
timing.
Probably not the best timing for my GPA, but it all worked out.
So you convinced your parents to allow you to take a calculated risk, which was to take a semester off so you could really see if this worked.
Yeah, I didn't actually give them a choice, but
Okay,
we came to like a negotiated settlement, which was I would take a semester off, and if it was working, then I'd continue, and if it wasn't working, I'd go back to school. So.
And you were successful. You were able to stay and continue with your company, and in your company, you just have incredible growth along the way. You progress from upgrading to manufacturing, and you go public. You're sort of just this rocket ship of growth with Dell Computers. And during there were some really important strategic decisions that you made that were against the industry. One was this was a really hot time for consumer PCs, and you decided that you were going to focus on the higher margin business of business computers. And you also went against the industry and said, you know, I'm not going to go into any retail shops. I'm going to sell direct to consumers. Can you talk about how you knew that was the right decision and how that risk taking worked out?
Well, you know, we started the business with a direct orientation to customers, and what we found was that it was very efficient. We learned a tremendous amount from that interaction, and because the rate of change of the technology was so fast, there was also an ability to get the latest technology to the customer faster, right? So it was both it was an advantage kind of through the whole value chain, and it made the product more valuable. And you know, it was totally different, right? and you know, we just kind of saw it from a different perspective. What we didn't anticipate is this thing called the World Wide Web would come along, you know, on top of the internet later on, and then you could buy things online, and then it just really took off. You know, because that was like a kind of rocket fuel. But we definitely saw that, you know, when you sold to businesses, they would require, you know, more support and more services, and it opened up all kinds of adjacent markets that we could expand into, and yeah, I mean, you know, the company grew about 80% a year compounded for the first 8 years, and about 60% compounded for the next, you know, six years or so. So it was an enormous amount of growth, and you know, we made plenty of mistakes along the way, but none of them were fatal, and we learned quickly, and you know, we had tremendous, you know, people, and this wellspring of knowledge that we were getting from the customers really helped us to learn, you know, what we needed to do next.
Which you controlled. And I'm going to fast forward you a few more years and to 2013. So your company's, you went through your IPO, you're a public company, you're managing the CEO of this public company. You make the decision that you need to take Dell private, which was a very difficult process to go through. It ended up in a bit of a battle, but why did you understand that this was really critical for Dell to do?
So, you know, as our business was changing and evolving, yes, you know, PCs continued to be important, but we saw other opportunities beyond the PC. We were investing in those. And as we were investing in those, the financial market wasn't buying it, right? It was kind of saying, well, you're still mostly doing PCs, and, you know, says here in not the Boston Globe, but in, some
Less
other
reputable
newspaper,
papers.
said that the PC's dead, right? So I guess your company's dead too, right? So the stock goes down, and you're kind of looking at that and going, oh, well, that's no fun. Then the lower it goes, you kind of say, well, I guess they don't like it, so we'll just buy them all back, and we have great cash flow, so we'll do a big share repurchase. We'll just buy them all back. So we decided we could accelerate the changes in the company by giving public shareholders some of the benefits of the risks that we were taking by buying it back at a premium to the then public market price, but we took on all the risks. And this worked out very well. We went private in 2013. Like you said, it was a difficult thing to do. A lot of the public shareholders weren't too excited about that, but we got it done.
Got it done. And how has it been going from a CEO of a one-person company to the CEO of an enormous public company to back to being a CEO of a large private company?
It's a lot of fun. I've actually enjoyed every phase. I mean, it's more fun when you're growing and you're winning, right? Yeah. But every step along the way has been kind of a learning process. The big difference in running a public company, and I would say what we are now is probably better to state that it's a controlled company. You can have controlled companies that are public or private. We're a public filer, but we're controlled, with a very small group of shareholders, so we can make decisions quickly. And we can also take on risks that you probably wouldn't take on as a public company. If you're a public company, your analysts will be saying, well, they'll be asking you, well, what are your earnings per share going to be in the first quarter of next year? Well, if you want to have that be a fairly narrow range, you have to sort of navigate your business to do things to, fit within those constraints, and you might not make investments. And here's another way to think about it. Let's say that, we're the executive team of a public company, okay? And we're supposed to deliver $1 billion of earnings, next quarter, okay, in our company. Well, somebody, back in the corner has an idea for something new in the company that's going to make the business, a potential of, let's say, $100 or $200 million more in 2 years, but it requires $25 million of investment, okay? This group may never even hear about that opportunity because they're so focused on that $1 billion. That's not all bad, but it can be bad if you get this kind of overemphasis on the short term and you don't look out at the future opportunities.
So less 90-day concerns, and you're able to do longer strategic plans now as part of being, once you took Dell private.
That's right, and thinking about the business really from the perspective of how do we help our customers, how do we solve the unsolved problems, how do we think about winning, with our customers over a 3, 5, 10, 20-year period.
And after you went through this long, difficult process of getting Dell private again, you then went again in the opposite from what a lot of your competitors doing, which was getting narrower and more focused, and you got bigger. And part of that getting bigger was this, was the EMC deal. Can you tell us about why? I know that you actually tried doing it in 2009, and then it wasn't the right time. People didn't have the same appetite for risk at that time that you did, and you were able to make it happen in 2016. Can you tell us about what made you to go in this direction, this big risk and this enormous growth?
So there's a lot of history here, and my good friend Joe Tucci is here. He's been a great friend. We first met in 1994, before he had joined EMC. And in 2001, Dell and EMC came together and created a alliance that we called Dell EMC. This is 16 years ago. And it worked very well, better than really we had planned for. Became a multi-billion-dollar business. We learned how to work together in terms of R&D and sales, and how do we service customers, and how do we work our supply chains together. All aspects of the companies were collaborating together, to the point where in 2008, Joe and I were sitting down and saying, hey, maybe we should combine these companies together, right? And we had consultants on either side. We had secret meetings of the board of directors of both companies. We, meeting in undisclosed places and code names and all the stuff you do for these sort of things. And, then we ran into this thing called the global financial crisis. And the bankers said, forget about it, right? So we couldn't do that. And then in 2012, I started the process to go private. 2013, we completed that. We got off to a great start. We were doing really well. And so less than a year after completing that, I called up Joe again and said, hey, let's re-explore what we talked about back in 2009. And it wasn't, a flip decision at all, right? We spent more than a year studying everything, how would you do it? And then in October 2015, we announced the plan to combine. And then in September of last year, we completed it. And I'd say it's gone extremely well, thanks to our customers and partners, a fantastic team of people. The revenue synergies have been much greater than we thought. The real idea behind this is that by combining Dell and EMC, VMware, Pivotal, all the other members of the family, you create the essential infrastructure company that's number one in everything, all in one place. And there's all kinds of cross-innovation you can drive across those businesses. We also theorized that there would be a portfolio effect where decision makers would look across the whole family and see that we could provide a broad range of information technology across everything they're doing. The digital transformation, the Internet of Things, what are you doing with all your data, what's going on with artificial intelligence, machine learning, the IT transformation, workforce, security, all the things that are really interesting and exciting in affecting all businesses and all aspects of society right now. We would have an unprecedented capability because of the great work that both companies had done over the years, and it was very complementary. We didn't have a lot of overlap. We also knew from the period that we had worked together that the cultures were quite compatible. And one of the interesting things we did during the planning for this was we did a survey. We had 75,000 people across the whole organization, and we asked the former EMC folks and the former Dell folks, the companies were still separated at the time, and we said, hey, what are the things that make your current company successful? And we came up with 22 of them. It turns out the top 5 things were exactly the same things, right? And we took our very best people. We took about 300 of them out of the company and out of both companies and said, this is your job now. You're just going to plan this thing and make it really, really seamless, make it so that our customers have a great experience with their relationships that they've had, that the support experience continues to be great. We're going to keep investing heavily in R&D. We're investing last 3 years, $12.7 billion in R&D. Wow. The teams here in Boston are a very important part of that engine, leading our data center business. So it's been great.
Can you expand a little bit more on your R&D and what areas you're focusing on?
So we focus on, certainly the big problems that our customers have, and I kind of went through that briefly. But if you think about a business today, the role of data and information is really increasing, businesses are getting inundated with more and more data and information, and they're starting to realize that this is really like gold inside their business. And how do you use this data to now make better decisions and improve your products and services and outcomes in whatever you're doing using the data? And you hear different descriptions of this, the digital transformation, the Internet of Things, all the discussion around new computer science, like the artificial intelligence, the machine learning, all those kinds of things. The fuel for those things is the data. And big companies that have been around a long time, they have tons of data, right? And so they're trying to figure out how do they make use of all this so they can improve the outcomes. That's a big area for us. Another big area is how do you automate the infrastructure to run the applications and the data. And sometimes this is called clouds and next generation automated infrastructure. The third piece of it is the whole workforce. The people in your company, the thing that they experience is the device in front of them. And we've actually seen companies now making a pretty big pivot back to the PC because they figured out that, oh, this is actually important for productivity. We like really big screens. We want super thin, light notebooks. And by the way, if we don't have the right tools, we can't retain our people. We can't attract the new people. They don't want to work in the company. So how do we build an environment that is really embracing technology and the tools of the modern world? The other fourth area for us is security. And as you go into this age of smart machines and everything becomes intelligent, everything's connected, well, you have to really think through the whole challenge of securing all this because every business is based in some level around trust and assurance. And if there's some reduction in that because there's some exposure or breach, it really can bring the whole business into serious question. We've seen some giant companies that have had real problems there. So we think a lot about how do we secure the infrastructure, protect against the enormous number of threats that are out there, and that's a challenging problem that all of our customers face.
You and I were talking earlier about what advice all of us most need to do better at our companies. And one of the things you were talking about is data, which you just touched on, that we all have an extraordinary amount of data, and figuring out what to do with it, how do we optimize the data that we have in a time when there is an increasing amount of data coming in.
Yeah, and if you think you have a lot of data now, you'll probably have 1,000 times more in 5 years, right? Because the granularity of the data sources is changing, right? The bandwidth is improving. And so think about video data, okay? Video goes from 2K to 4K to 8K. The frames per second is increasing from 24, 48, 60 frames, 90 frames. And then you go to the 2 dimensions, 3 dimensions, 360 virtual reality. There's just incredible amounts of data. And then you look at the number of connected smart things, okay? There have been over 100 billion microprocessors sold in the last 4 years. This isn't like a projection, right? They're already out there. Most of them are not connected to anything, but increasingly, the cost of these sensors is approaching $0, so everything's getting connected, everything's becoming intelligent. And that's creating this explosion of data, and then the challenge is how do you use that data in real time to make a better product, a better service, a better outcome. And firms are really just at the beginning of this, but it's setting up the foundation for a kind of fourth industrial revolution. And I think companies, organizations that figure out how to use this data.
You're saying the fourth industrial revolution is going to be based on data?
Yeah, it'll be based on all this instrumentation, the data, the artificial intelligence, the connectivity, but the data becomes more and more valuable as you get the computational power. And then you have to also think about kind of reimagining what your business does, because there will be combinatorial inventions where you take different parts of new things. Oh, now I have all this bandwidth, now I have all this data, now something is smart and intelligent and it can operate autonomously. Well, okay, now we have a new product, right? And so you'll see lots of those kind of combinatorial inventions in technology.
So what you're talking about with the data and increasing amount of data coming in and where we are all storing it, with major tech companies like AWS and Microsoft and Google also driving cloud offerings, how do you see Dell positioning itself in that landscape?
What we see is the cloud is not a place, it's a way of doing IT. And what we have seen is that there is a boom in edge computing. There's definitely a boom in the distributed core, and there's this buildup of the cloud. But what customers are starting to realize is that if they run all to the public cloud, it doesn't work so well. First of all, the amount of data becomes incredibly expensive, and it really becomes more of a workload-dependent discussion. So some workloads might work well there, but when you automate and modernize the infrastructure and you software-define everything, for the predictable workloads, the on-premise systems and the systems in colo providers and that kind of thing are super efficient. So companies are starting to realize it's more of a hybrid cloud or multi-cloud world as opposed to everything goes one way or another. And that's even before you have this explosion of data from the edge. So imagine if you're operating a factory and you've got robots whizzing around your factory. Or you've got a smart car, right? Your car is driving autonomously. Well, is your smart car going to go back to the cloud to figure out what to do when something jumps in front of the car? It's going 80 miles an hour? Probably not, right? You need some intelligence in that car, and the computing has been distributed for a long time. And what we're seeing is a pendulum swing back to even more distributed. As you get this explosion in the number of connected nodes, improvements in bandwidth, and you'll have new applications that will emerge in this new world of edge computing. So computing will continue to grow in many, many forms. And what we're really seeing is information technology is kind of breaking out of information technology into every field. So you can't do anything. Can't buy a product, can't sell a product, can't make a product, design, big company, small company, without technology.
There's so much more to talk about, but I want to open it up to the crowd and see if there are any questions here. We have some people with microphones. There's a question right behind you.
Taking slightly different tack, I'd want to know what motivates your and values motivate your philanthropy, and what are you trying to accomplish with your generosity?
Well, thank you for the question. We have been focused on improving the lives of children in urban poverty, and part of it was just a realization that we had some pretty fortunate children, and there were lots of children that weren't quite as fortunate. And we have been blessed, and we have an opportunity to help others. So we've taken the kind of learnings from our business and some very talented people from our business and set up the foundation about 20 years ago, working with nonprofits, with governments, with community organizations, with social entrepreneurs. And we've really been focused on education, on healthcare, on helping people out of poverty and creating access to education. And we'll touch about 10 million people a year, here in this country and in a few other countries around the world. About a year ago, we spun up a team particularly focused on Boston, right? As we're, as our family's spending a bit more time here. And so we've been a little bit more engaged in the community here, and you'll start to see us doing a few more things here and there.
Great question. I think we have time for one or two more.
And of course, our company does all sorts of things in the community. EMC had a great legacy of community involvement, and we're absolutely going to continue that and expand upon it.
Great. Is there another question back there? And there's another one.
There you go. So Michael, if you could go back to the dorm room again with today's equivalent of $1,000 and start something all over again, what would it be?
Well, fortunately, I don't have that problem. I'm not really sure. I do think the whole bioinformatics is incredibly interesting. I mean, I think the intersection of the information sciences and the biosciences, not just because that's a really interesting thing going on in Boston, but that is fascinating. It turns out I was a biology major, before I started a computer company. But starting a computer company is way easier than organic chemistry. I can tell you that. But I don't know what I'd do. I don't have that problem, so I don't think about it much.
There's a question back there. Right there.
Hey, it's Stas Gation from CIC. Just wanted to welcome you to Boston. And I read on Twitter that you're going to be spending a lot more time here. And since I think what we've learned from 2017 is that Twitter is the source of all useful information, I'm glad to know that that's true. So I have one quick question and a quick follow-up. Number one, what's the most interesting thing that you're working on in the research labs that you can't tell us about? Can you immediately tell us what that is? And two, as one Bostonian to another, how can we play with that? And how do we get it? The new stuff you're working on in the labs, that is.
Well, what I would point to is we have a group in our company called Dell Technologies Ventures. And actually, there's a website. You can see what we're doing. I think so far this year, we've been investing in about one company a week. And these are all relatively early stage companies, and they're sort of 24, 36, 48 months out in the future in the path of growth. Disclaimer here, we're not an investor in anything, right? We only invest in things that are important and interesting to our business. So, if you want to come pitch me, just be aware. We're pretty focused at Dell Technologies Ventures. But you can see from the kinds of investments that we're making, the things that we think are interesting. And it's a lot of machine learning, artificial intelligence, next generation security kinds of things. How do you make use of all this incredible explosion in data that's occurring? Those are some of the interesting problems that are out there. And I think a lot of companies are excited about the digital transformation, but they're also fearful because, hey, there's a lot of new companies coming into these spaces. It's moving very quickly. It's only going to go faster and faster. And so that's the challenge we have to help all of our customers with.
Are you cutting us off? Well, I want to thank you, Michael. That was subtle. This has just been, there's so much more that we could talk about, but your story of, your own personal story of what you've done and sort of how you've found and believed in yourself and taken incredible risks along the way is really inspiring. And how you are now head of this 138,000 person empire, and you're still maintaining this culture of entrepreneurship inside of it is really exciting. I can't wait to see what you do next. Welcome to Boston.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.